Thank you, right? So, I think two things. The first one is the serious ethical risk when it comes to corporates and how it is also intertwined with the public sector. If you have read about Glencore, they've been fined last year 1.1 billion for corrupt activities, mainly in Africa, to maximize profits. So, as we dissect about the corporate ethical challenges, I think it's important not only to say shareholders, because within corporates, there is also the problem of agents, directors. They also try to maximize their returns. And if you follow closely to the Companies Act, directors are held accountable more to the company than to the shareholders. Legally, I think it's an issue that has to be explored in this kind of conversation. Then the second point that I want to bring is, when we talk about the public sector, the risk for the public sector, I think it's also important that we acknowledge the issue of maximizing the public value. I think this is the most uniqueness of the public sector to the private sector. The private sector is more than shareholders. I think all kind of risks have involved that simply tell us that who are we dealing with. But let me conclude, because I always bring this point that the evil, we should look at it straight. When slavery was abolished, it is the slave owners who were compensated and not the slaves. Those that were making money from selling and exploiting human beings. When colonialism was said to have ended, the companies that plundered Africa, I have not heard of any compensation that Zimbabwe got from the British South African Company or any other companies, your Anglo-American, that were involved in the plunder of this country and Africa. That is off the table. We're talking about peace. We're not talking about climate injustice right now. It is difficult to have a fair conversation in a context in which the companies that are dealing in dirty fuels are declaring profits in billions and billions of dollars. And yet today we are talking about cyclone that is going to hit Mozambique, Madagascar, and billions are required to, where is that money going to come from? All I'm trying to say is the complexity of the risks that we're dealing with and the ethical challenges that are there, particularly if it comes to illicit financial flows and other challenges, are so intertwined with the public sector risk of maximizing the public value. So I think that's a comment, but I think you can also sift if there are things that you would want to respond to. Thank you.
I'd like to just say two things that I think are very important, and I'm really encouraged and strengthened by the conversations that were being had. The first one is that I absolutely support the idea, the suggestion by Mr. Ndoro, that it would be very good to have our legislators participating in this conversation. And I'm saying this in particular because it turns out that, well, I'm personally in shock. I discovered on Monday precisely that the Criminal Codification and Law Reform Act is being amended by Parliament, that there's a bill before Parliament that seeks to amend the clause that deals with these issues of ethics, particularly that are critical around ethics in the public sector in particular, and duty as public officers, because I believe the issue of duty is entirely around ethics. Most of the things that public officers do when they are doing their work are not spelled out and spelled out in all lines. Duty as a public officer is a lot, it turns a lot around ethics. Now, shockingly, what is happening is that Clause 5 of the bill that's amending the Criminal Code, is seeking to do something that I'm speaking just as a commissioner was like that. You urge prosecutions. So, but there are two things that are there. I mean, one, we don't prosecute as ZAC. You're putting Dr. Nyaude on the spot by telling him, prosecutions. He can't prosecute. He doesn't prosecute. We don't prosecute. in terms of the Constitution, what the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission simply does is that we're empowered to do all the policy things, but we're also empowered to investigate. We investigate, and then we compile dockets, and then we submit them to the National Prosecuting Authority, our twin in the Chapter 13 institutions. I hope it doesn't mean that it's an unlucky number. So we don't prosecute, and we don't try, we don't convict, we don't sentence, but we try to do our duty. We're actually seeking prosecution powers in our lay bill that hasn't come, but for us to be able, and we are interested in prosecutions. We want prosecutions. We want them that are effective, and we want convictions, and we want sentences that are deterrent. But for us to succeed, we need two things. And one of them is that we need tools, and tools that are sharp. And one of them is legislation. But what's happening right now is that the tool that is there is not very sharp in terms of the criminal code. We don't have sufficient legislative instruments in the law that are not sufficient. We need to develop them. And the one that we have right now is not very sharp. So that tool that is there, that is not very sharp, is actually being blunted further, if you get what I mean. The offense of criminal abuse of duty is the one. If you look at our criminal offenses at ZAC, for the crimes that are being prosecuted, we use Section 174. Most of the ZAC offenses are Section 174, criminal abuse of duty, not of office. It's called criminal abuse of duty. So what it currently provides right now is that if a person who is a public officer, which is defined also narrowly, it's very blunt, that if a person does anything contrary to their duty, number one, or omits to do anything contrary to the duty, they are guilty of the offense of criminal abuse of duty as a public officer. But what the proposal is seeking to do, it's seeking to blunt it further. It's actually introducing a defense to something that is already so defendable. It's seeking to add the qualifier that for you to be found guilty of abusing duty by omitting or doing something duty, you ought to have known, you should have known that he or she knows, when he or she knows that it is their duty to do something or it's their duty not to do something. A defense is being introduced by the legislature right now as we speak. So I'm just speaking that I discovered this on Monday. I'm shocked that how is this happening? The tool is already blunt. It's being blunted further. So, and I don't know if there's been activism and voices around clamor that, look, we need to have sharp tools. We need more tools. We can't blunt the very weak ones that we already have. We need to strengthen our legislation. So I'm hoping to hear across the room and all these brilliant and marvelous people that are here in the organizations, I'm hoping to see you also writing submissions to Parliament regarding this bill. Because what I think should instead happen is that they should, in Section 169, there's a definition section of what public officer is, and it's very narrow. It only includes those people who are actually paid by the state and who are public, or like maybe political office bearers. So what we would like as ZAC is we would like to see that being expanded, because we've had great difficulty when we investigate dockets and they are sent to the courts. We've had people getting off the hook who are not necessarily those people who are paid directly, but people who work for parastatals. They are private companies, but the state has taken them. But for example, ZETDC, if a person in ZETDC today abuses public duty and does something, they have a defense. The courts are ruling that, but they are not public officers in terms of the definition. So what we would like to see Parliament doing is strengthening that act. It should not introduce that defense. Number two, we wanted to widen the definition of public officer to include those people who are also in companies that are where the state has a stake. And we want to see new offenses. We want to see the offense of corruption. And I'm sure Mr. Mondero can even craft offenses around ethics. And I mean, there are so many. We don't have many offenses in Zimbabwe regarding crimes around corruption. We actually want to see those. And we have our draft bill, a lay bill as the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, that we want to replace the current Anti-Corruption Act. But it's been waiting for 3 years for anyone to take an interest in it. So we're hoping that as you clamour for prosecutions and things like that, I think we need to all participate in working towards getting tools and sharper tools, and to stop the blunting of the already inadequate tools that are blunt already that there is. So can we hear some clamor? Thank you.
Mine is directed towards Mr. Taungana Ndoro. Of course, I'm not going to thank him because I have not allowed us to do so. But coming from the same from the same area, the education sector, also being a critical stakeholder there, we have raised a lot of fundamental issues to talk about, especially in regards to the integrity of our education. But because due for public interest, I thought it is necessary also maybe for you to highlight. You have mentioned the issue of SIMSEC leakages. You mentioned the issue of extra lessons. So I've got a question to you for public interest. That do you really think that the integrity of our education is still in good shape after you have raised these issues? And do you think that it is the players in that department who happens to be the employees who have actually aided to if the integrity is not in good shape, or it is the organization collectively? And also, what do you think can be done in order to avoid that? Are there any other people or departments who are acting unethically as well, trying not to involve all stakeholders by actually further creating hostility with other important stakeholders such as teachers union, with the ministry, who are also supposed to be collectively working together to maintain the integrity of the education sector? And also on the issue of the ethics on the employees, the remuneration part of it. Sorry, I might now sound like I'm going deeper into trade union, but I just want, because these are the issues also that have been raised. The welfare of them, do you think that they are still also in their mental, what can I say, the mental health, depending on what they are getting, is still balanced vis-a-vis, because you have raised a lot of issues, but do you think these issues are not also being aided by the issue of mental health vis-a-vis the welfare or what they are getting? Thank you, but I thought maybe you can clarify on this. We know we've got our areas where we meet and discuss, but since you have raised this, I think it's for public interest as well.
Thank you very much. Just wrap this up, so we probably need to be jumping onto that. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. My question is also directed to Mr. Ndoro. You have mentioned some instances where there was some sort of ethical breaches by headmasters, some of them which you said you know. So I just want to know, just in the public interest, that have you made any reports regarding this? And if so, has there been any prosecutions in regards to that?
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Tsumbi had her hand up. Where is she? Yes, right over there.
Thank you. So my question is around the issue of committed leadership. When we're looking at tackling corruption and building this ethical culture, how do we foster that committed leadership? Especially when you're dealing particularly perhaps with large institutions or the public sector where there's multiple levels of leadership. If we're thinking about committed leadership coming from the top, how long should it take to trickle down through all the different levels of leadership for us to begin to see an impact? And then a specific question around the example that you gave, Mr. Ndoro, of how you've jumped the different levels and gone straight to the head to deal and tackle with a particular problem. My question is around how then does that leave the system which has been put in place, the bureaucratic system or the management system, able to deal with these issues? If, say, someone with a different leadership style than yourself, once you retire, someone else comes in and is promoted from that leadership chain, their style will be different. How then does that middle chunk deal with the issues that they are supposed to deal with, which are coming from the bottom? I know it gets results, but does it not disable the system and the structure that's supposed to be sort of handling all of these things through the different layers of management? Thank you.
Now, thank you very much for all those questions, and especially our colleague from ZAC. We pointed out quite a number of beneficial issues about the law and the legislation, which is a bit blunt, where now we're having a bill that is saying ignorance is an excuse, and yet in certain criminal laws, ignorance is not an excuse. That you bought something that was stolen, you still get prosecuted and convicted. But now with this act, this bill, it may give us a challenge. Thanks, we'll try and advocate for that also through other structures. Then my good friend over there was talking about, is the education system integrity still in good shape? Even though you've talked of the examination leakages and the extra lessons, etc. Let me assure you one thing. We have got about 10,147 schools in the country. The countries where, the schools where you find issues of extra lessons, basically, are those schools in communities that are resourced or slightly more resourced. But most of our schools are in the rural areas. Now, in the rural areas, it's roundabout impossible to conduct paid for extra lessons in Rushinga, in Mzarabani, in Gokwe, in Malipati, in Kai, in Bulilima. It's almost impossible. But go to the peri-urban and metropolitan areas, Glenview, Highfields, Mavuku, Mpopoma, Pumula. That's where you start having this problem. And we can count those number of schools. They're just a fraction. So the integrity is still intact. So going back to what Mr. Mondero said, this is where we are finding the morally unstable, who are being swayed because those around them are doing or acting in a similar way. So we just want them to continue with extra lessons if they feel that there's a topic that needs to be elaborated further, but not to say to a parent, pay $10 for me to give your child an extra lesson. But otherwise, everything is still intact. This is why Zimbabwe remains the country with the best quality education on the continent. Last year in September, I was with the Honorable Minister in South Africa, where we signed a memorandum of understanding where the South African Department of Basic Education is so eager to come and learn the Zimbabwean education system. They want to get to know how we are doing it, because Zimbabweans all over the world, all over the region, they are in top positions. Whether it is at a restaurant in South Africa, the Zimbabwean is the manager. You go to America, Australia, England, Germany, it's the Zimbabweans. They are reigning. The World Bank, you see Zimbabweans. It's because of our education system. It's still very much intact. This is why, as Zimbabweans, when we start to interrogate these issues, this discussion will be taken so much further, because here I can only see a likeness of mind of people who are very, very intelligent, because they received the Zimbabwean education system, which is of very, very high quality. Right. And then you also asked, what do you think can be done in terms of, you're thinking that there is hostility between government or the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education and teachers' unions? Well, there is no hostility. As a matter of fact, we understand each other on a mutual engagement basis. I am frequently in engagement with the leaders of the Progressive Teachers Union, the leaders of the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union, the leadership of the Zimbabwe Teachers Union, and a host of other. In fact, we actually have a WhatsApp group, of which I'm the administrator. And we chat on issues and we engage on issues almost on a daily basis. You can ask your leaders within the teachers' unions. They know the stories that come out. But in the background, we're talking. We all want the same thing. On top of that, let me go back to the MOU which the minister signed. Government is considering this. Probably I'm not supposed to preempt it, but it has taken a lot of traction. That we're looking at issues of having a teachers' professional council, sort of, or what you would call the equivalent of the Law Society of Zimbabwe, where lawyers have to get registered or deregistered by the Law Society of Zimbabwe. We also want that here in Zimbabwe, to have a teaching professional council where teachers get, you get your qualification, but you also then need to get registered by the council, so that if you do anything that is unethical, right, anything corrupt, you get deregistered as a teacher. And before you get employed anywhere, whether in a private, non-governmental school or in a government school, you have to provide your membership card that I'm a member of the Teaching Professional Council. They find you as a teacher of high integrity. You yourselves as teachers then start to police yourself before even government comes in. And we think that is a very good thing. That when you don't have that membership card, we really, no school is going to look at you. They are just going to say, how can we say that? Yes, you've got the qualification, but you're not registered. Yes, you've got the qualification of a lawyer, but you're not registered. You have the qualification of a doctor, but you're not registered with the medical associations. I hope you follow. So this is where we're moving towards. So the first line of making sure that teachers are ethical will be yourselves and amongst yourselves. Then the issue of the teachers' welfare. This one, we have a multi-sectoral approach. Our mandate as the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education is to provide quality, relevant, and inclusive education. But working as the whole of government, we also work with other ministries and arms of government, such as the Ministry of Public Service, Labor and Social Welfare, and also the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development. And we continue to lobby for a betterment or improvement of teachers' welfare. And this is why you see our Honorable Minister has been going all out, particularly in schools that are newly built. The first thing that the Honorable Minister has been insisting on is to have teachers' cottages that make sure that it is very habitable for them. There's electricity, there's water, there's flush system for the teachers to actually remain there. Because we have had the challenges where teachers get to certain schools, there's no infrastructure even for them to stay. As they are assuming duty, they are also putting their transfer application. So the welfare of teachers is not just remuneration. It's also where the teachers are staying. Are they staying in a house? In certain schools, there are houses where the teachers' cottages are actually air-conditioned. They've got electricity. They've got water. They've got even a swimming pool. These are public schools that we are talking about in certain areas. This is what we're trying to move towards. Then there are other incentives that are also non-monetary, which the government has proffered to teachers. And it is mainly teachers who are the ones who are using the civil service rebate for importing motor vehicles. This is just for your own information. We have piles and piles of applications from teachers who are importing motor vehicles using the civil service rebate. So it means it's non-monetary. They're not paying duty because they're a teacher. Thank you.
It's okay. All right. Yeah, but maybe one or two comments on the issue of committed leadership. How can you grow committed leadership? I think from the starting point is that leadership of any organization has to know that they are accountable for the growth of an ethical culture in the organization. That's the starting point. Then also the existence of standards, local standards. Take, for example, the Public Entities Corporate Governance Act. Like I said, Section 244, it actually requires public entities to grow an ethical culture that is measurable. So it is the responsibility of the leadership of that organization to make sure that that culture is developed. Developing the culture creates an atmosphere of an infrastructure that causes even employees to feel free to report misconduct where they see it, where they observe it. You see, so when an ethical culture is created in the organization, it also helps to create a committed leadership. And also, it goes beyond that to include even issues to do with recruitment. Because when we have the right infrastructure in place in terms of the development of an ethical culture, it means that we are also even able to recruit the right people for the right positions, especially key positions like the CEO's position. It becomes possible to recruit the right person when we have the right infrastructure for culture development, ethical culture development in place. Then the other area that was that Jesse picked on, where and him, the issue of using the law, right? Good, the law, it's good to use it in addressing issues to do with ethics. But I think what's important for us to realize is that the law simply provides the minimum standards. And we need to go beyond the law to invoke that spirit of self-regulation in our organizations, self-regulation in individuals. How is that made possible? When we have that infrastructure, ethics management infrastructure, we need to manage our ethics. When we have that infrastructure in place, it becomes possible for us then to use such methods as a proactive method to addressing issues to do with misconduct. Because the law is reactive, but ethics looks at the underlying causes of the problem before it comes out. So you are trying to address it proactively using ethics. So I think at the same time, I also buy into what she said when she said, I think at government level, there is need for the government itself to come up with a framework that promotes ethics in public institutions. A framework, and they can also even buy into, tap into what the public entities, corporate governance itself is articulating vis-a-vis the development of an ethical culture. Yes.
Thanks. Sorry, I forgot just two questions. I think there was one about what happens to headmasters that we discovered. Headmasters that are found to have conducted any cases of misconduct. One of the first things that we do is to make sure that they leave the station. And leaving the station means they can work as sit-in headmasters within the district office whilst we are waiting to transfer them. We have had the headmasters where parents have actually said, we don't want this headmaster, and the situation becomes really ungovernable. We have to take that headmaster and put him at another school where it is safe for him or her because of the demonstrations, whilst we carry out those investigations. And if there are any charges that are preferred, we prefer them through the public service regulations. I hope you answered. And then the last one was on the leadership style, that I talk to certain headmasters directly. The reason why I do this is that we're in a very dynamic era, right? A technology era, a WhatsApp era, right? By the time I wait for a head to write a report to the district office takes it to the provincial office, the story has hit the headlines and the narrative is gone. I hope you understand. So we try and manage the narrative first. And then after we've done all that, due process also then takes place, where we then report to the district and to the provincial office that this is what we did with this school. And I'm not the only one who knows about it. You'll find the district schools inspector knows about it, the PED knows about it, and even my deputy director who also know about it. So even when I leave, there is still some system that I have already put in place. Thank you.
Great.